Hey, welcome everyone. This is Mind Your Own Business. My name is Pablo, and thanks for listening.
So I've been a manager and a boss for many years. I'm not now because I chose not to be. But what I'm discovering with younger people that's very different from others who are older is the younger people now also are not prepared to accept working in an environment where they don't feel supported, or that there's compassion, or that there's um, individualism. And whereas older people have always said, well, I'll adjust, I will adjust, and hopefully it will get better. Young people are like, no, you will adjust, your workplace will adjust, because if you don't, I'm leaving. And it's a very different dynamic because the young people are prepared to leave any workplace if they don't feel they can be authentic, if they don't feel it has good ethics, the right values, the leadership is bad, they will leave. My generation, they didn't. They just stuck it out, kept thinking it's going to change, and that's why we have the mess in so many locations that we have, because we allowed it to happen. My generation kept quiet, just followed along, didn't make noise, didn't push, right? The young generation, they're completely the opposite. And that's why I have hope that things can shift, because a lot of young people will not accept workplace culture if it's terrible. They won't.
And I'm curious, Paul, about consistency because before we saw a better consistency in any process, or not any process, but in the workplace mainly. Now the span of someone working, especially my age, which is 30 years old, it's 6 months to 1 year, and then we're out and we just jump from one place to the
Completely.
other.
Yeah, you have 20 careers in 30 years, whereas I'm very different, and I know that, but most people in my generation would have one or two, maybe three, and it would always be because they were being promoted, or they got a new job that was higher up. But young people, they go where they're happy, and happiness is very important to them. Happiness and flexibility and core values, ethics. They don't put up with the shit that we did, which is, I think, fantastic. And it gives me hope that things are getting better. But man, there's still a lot of work to do.
And in your eyes, Paul, how do you create that irresistible workplace? You already mentioned, but I would love to, yeah.
You're asking me that question. I think what you do is, I mean, everyone, and this is really my message to the world. Every day, everyone is responsible for the workplace culture and the team culture that they bring to work. It's not the responsibility of the bosses or the leaders or the managers. It's all our responsibility. And workplace culture is our responsibility, but organizations can set the stage for a wonderful workplace culture. And especially if we're talking about bullying and harassment and discrimination and racism, organizations can really, if they ensure that the modern workplace is focused on workplace respect and has a very clear policy around behavior and what is expected behavior and what is unacceptable behavior. Um, and the policy can't just be words. The policy has to have things like a mandatory reporting mechanism, so that even if you witnessed bad behavior, you have an obligation to report that behavior. And this is what I do, a lot of work with organizations on this exact issue, which is changing a policy around how we behave at work into a practice. And then you incorporate that policy into performance management. So, for example, you aren't just performance managed on how good you are, how successful your last project was. It's also how much of a team player are you? How do you show up at work? What is your attitude? Do you support those around you? If I ask those who work with you, what would they say about you? Would they say you're a really kind colleague? Would they say you're a respectful, patient, tolerant person? Because that's what we need. Performance. And if you're not, then we have to figure out how do we help you become a better colleague, a better person. And so it's a combination of a workplace respect policy that holds everyone accountable for themselves and each other, but also that that policy is enforced and it's used not as a weapon, but as a tool for change. And we should have incorporated in that policy things like team spirit, workplace respect, and everyone, if we combine the policy and accountability and showing up every work, understanding it today is it's my responsibility to lead with the workplace culture I want. And if we bring all of that together, I think you have the irresistible workplace culture foundation. And to me, that's how you get change.
So what I'm hearing you say is you want to have like the company can be like during like the first 1 or 2 days in high school where the teacher was like, okay, these are the ground rules for the entire year,
Absolutely.
which is I think is brilliant because you know the parameters that you the framework. Uh,
Yes.
Replicating that and then turning those words into behaviors. They're not just words, they're just how we would manage from now moving forward. But I'm curious to know like being something that's hard to measure, right? Like because I know people will out there will be like, yeah, but it's easier to perform to measure the performance of I don't know sales, posting on social media, as opposed to just like, are you a team player or are you a person that respects the rest? So how can we change that mindset of yeah my performance is based on these numbers to my performance is based on these other concepts that in turn will increase the numbers here but focusing on these personal aspects first.
Well, I don't think it's easy, but to back to your point about when people begin. So the organizations that I work with, what we do is we create mandatory training for everybody. And it's also mandatory training that becomes a component of onboarding. So when a person begins, they have to attend a virtual training session on what is our expectation for workplace behavior. And it focuses on workplace respect policies and what do they mean and what is your responsibility as an employee here to be a respectful person. And then I think it's always about like courage, honesty, integrity, compassion. These are all things that are contagious. And if we show up and demonstrate, well, I'll be accountable for not only my behavior, but if you're having a bad day, I will support you. If you step out of line, I will let you know that behavior is not acceptable here. And when we set boundaries for ourselves, but also as a group, those things become the way that the group begins to operate all the time. And the easiest example is to have I'll give you an actual example that of an organization I worked with where they had a real problem with gossip. And gossip is such a toxic force in workplaces. So everyone attended training, but we created these big signs that simply had the word gossip with an X through it. And everyone had to sign those posters. And those posters were put up all over their office. And what the employees were encouraged to do is when someone began gossiping, because we will, humans do these things, people were just encouraged to just point and say, you signed that. We don't do that anymore. And now I see some of their employees on the streets here because their office is very close to where I live. And they recognize me because that happens. And they just walk by me and they go, and they laugh and they said, it works. No one gossips here anymore. No one. And if they do, we just point to the sign and they go, oh my God, you're right. Sorry, sorry, sorry. I won't do it. And so you set up and establish a group behavior where being held accountable for our mistakes isn't terrible. It isn't a punishment. It's done as a positive reinforcement. And you're not made to feel terrible, or you're just made to realize, right, this is how we behave here. And so I firmly believe that it is a team effort. We need to support each other, but we need as a team to agree, what are our rules and how do we enforce them?
Part of your work is in the anti-bullying,
A lot of it.
framework, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that that should be obvious. It's unfortunately it's not, and
No, it's not.
your 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 take on it, on what to do when you're actually facing a situation in which you think you're being bullied at work, what to do, or maybe just general.
Well, that's a huge question, as you can imagine, and context is everything. Um, the first thing I would say is it's important to understand that bullying is very misunderstood by HR people, by leaders, and it's a global issue. Statistically, 70% of every workplace, 70% of the people have been impacted by workplace bullying or harassment. That doesn't matter if you're in Dubai or in New York or in Sydney or in Hong Kong. And it doesn't matter the industry. These are problems that are just everywhere. And so the first thing is you have to look at the context. So when you are facing bullying, it's not as simple as there's a solution. You have to look at your policies that we just talked about. So most modern workplace policies would have bullying included and defined as an unacceptable behavior. So if your policy does have something like that, you have a fantastic modern policy. If it doesn't, or you don't even have a policy, it's a lot harder. The context really matters because you also have to understand, why is this person bullying you? What is going on? And this is where most of us really fail. We believe that someone is bullying us because we're bad performers. We're not meeting the standard of expectation, or it's our fault. True bullying is the absolute opposite. What society doesn't understand is workplace bullies are not the same as bullies in schools. In schools, bullies attack vulnerable people. Anyone who is different. You could be wearing eyeglasses. You could be new to the school. You could be from a different culture. There's many ways that a child could be vulnerable and therefore weak, and a bully will attack that person. At work, it's opposite. Bullies, 95% of the time, are targeting the most smart, the most respected, the most experienced, the most loved and appreciated person in their midst, which is not what you would think, because you would think a smart bully would be leveraging the talent and the experience and using it to their advantage. They don't think that way, because in the mind of a bully is a lot of insecurity, a lot of fear of not being the rock star, because they need control, they need to dominate, and they need to be a rock star. And it's always about them, always, always. So any person that takes away the light that they demand is a threat. And so people that are really high performers, high achievers, excellent colleagues, loved by everyone, they're the ones bullies target. And that's the problem, is that we don't understand this. And when we begin to understand it and understand the mind and the motivation of a bully, then it becomes really a different landscape. You begin to realize, wow, I'm being targeted because they're afraid of me in their not so good mind. They're feeling insecure. That doesn't justify the behavior, but it explains it. And so once we begin to understand what's going on in the mind of a bully, you can also begin to understand how do you prevent or how do you address the behavior itself. And that's complicated. And I can't answer it in one question. But imagine that it takes smart people who understand the dynamic. And the best advice I can give is, if you are being targeted, first, reach out to people like me who care, who can help you. Because I don't want anyone to make the mistakes I made when I was bullied. Because I made every mistake imaginable, and that was a mess. It was terrible. But if you have tools, and if you have patience, and if you can be strategic and take your time, I promise you that you can solve the bullying problem. Now, that doesn't mean that you can stop the bully. It may mean that the best strategy for you is a patient exit strategy, because some organizations thrive on that kind of culture. And if you become part of an organization that's been this way for 30 years, it's not going to change. And so you sometimes have to be practical and realistic and realize, oh, I don't have that much power or influence. But on the other hand, certain organizations are prepared to change, but you need to be very careful about how you address the problem. And that's why you need to be patient and get allies and document examples of behavior and begin to understand how to manipulate the bully to behave badly, and you document it. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but it works. It really works. And just imagine the difference between me going to HR with one example of a bad behavior from a bully, no other examples, no one was witnessing it, no group examples, no other allies who are also saying, yes, I was there and she did that. So imagine just one example, one behavior, you go to HR and HR goes like, well, it's what you said against what she said. She's very powerful. I'm afraid of her. I'm not sure I'm prepared to take that fight on. But imagine if I spent 6 or 7 months documenting things, and I had 10 examples, and I had 4 other people who were prepared to come to HR with me. Now HR's got 5 people, 1 person, and HR is saying, okay, we have a very different problem on our hands. This evidence is very hard to ignore. And so it's about preparing well and taking your time and being super strategic and finding ways to cope in the middle of it. And it's not easy, but if you can do it, you will survive and you will not come out of that ruined.
I was about to ask, like, something people can do today after watching this video if they have a bully in their team. But I was thinking that first you need to spot the bully. How is there a good way for you to actually spot?
Oh, sure.
And then
Absolutely.
to
So a bully will, like I said, when you see bad behavior, it's super important to step back, get away from your personal feelings, and just be more objective and look at the situation and ask yourself, okay, what is going on here? And be prepared to give someone the benefit of the doubt. Are they super stressed? Are they super tired? Do they have something going on in their personal life that is contributing to them being really impatient at work? Are they generally angry? What is their personality trait that you have come to learn? And historically, how have they acted? And when you begin to take all those pieces of the puzzle, you will begin to see whether the person is just having a really bad day or a really bad project or a really bad month, or this is a habit of this person. And when you begin to separate a single or a bad time, a stressed out person from a person who is intentionally targeting somebody, because it's completely intentional and methodical and escalating, then you can begin to differentiate between just a badly behaved person who's just super stressed or what it might be, versus someone who is intentionally doing something to hurt another person and undermining them and trying to eliminate them and their influence from the workplace, because that's really what a bully wants to do. They want to take out that person's influence, and usually they want to eliminate that person from the workplace so that they can get all the attention. And it's very calculated.
I was about to ask, uh, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Oh boy. So if I had that opportunity to sort of sit with myself, then I would probably say, be less afraid of what people think and think of you, and more focused on the values that you hold dear, and fearlessly defend yourself and the values that you hold dear, and especially against disrespectful behavior. Um, I would say follow your heart more than your wallet or what you think is the definition of success. Because frankly, success isn't about money or a position or a role or a thing. It's about happiness. It's about feeling satisfied at the end of a hard day. It's about being a good friend or a kind colleague. It's about earning the respect of others. And I would think that if you can, like, to me as a 20, if I was 20 again, I would say inspire by including others. Inspire by being a mentor that people respect. Lead with respect, and everything else will fall in its place. And I've wished I would have understood when I was younger that by being vulnerable, being real, being open to accepting my flaws and my weaknesses, that I would actually find more happiness. I would find my people. I would find my passion, and probably my destiny, if you want to get sort of, more deep. But I was afraid to be authentic and afraid to be vulnerable when I was young, because I thought that would be a weakness. And it's actually the opposite. It's an attraction. It is a badge of how people begin to accept and respect you, because you understand who you are and you're prepared to be authentic at work. And that's also why I have hope for younger people. What I'm seeing with younger people is that they're more dialed into their core values. They're more prepared to say, I don't like this workplace because you're not kind to each other. You don't have good ethics. You don't seem to care about people. And young people, when they see that, they say, I'm out of here. I'm not going to be here. I'm not working here. I wished that every time a young person felt that way, they didn't just quit. I wished that they set up a meeting with the CEO or vice president or director or whatever the highest roles are in that organization, set up a meeting and said, you know what? I just want you to know that I am leaving because this is a toxic place to work. And you're never going to keep good people like me if you don't do something about it. And you just leave it there. That is a way of holding the organization and the leaders accountable. If you just leave silently, they're not really going to know. And they're just going to say, well, that's young people. Young people always come and they go and they don't stay. Well, what if they realized young people weren't staying because their workplace culture was disrespectful and not acceptable to young people? I believe things would change, and I believe they would change quickly. So I encourage young people, as part of that growth, to be courageous, to speak up, and you'll never know the impact you had on that leader if you don't show that courage and that honesty. Because for all you know, that leader could be the person that says, you changed the course of this organization. You didn't know it, but you did. And 2 years later, that leader may call you and say to you, first, I want to thank you for making this known to me. But secondly, I would like you to come back as a leader because I'm going to prove to you that we changed this place. And that's what I'm talking about. That's how we all contribute every day to making the workplace that we want to work in the workplace that is the one we want to work in.
And that, that goes back to what you said about every single person should own the culture in the team they're in. Like, it's not like these are the rules, the vision, the mission of the company. So I need to do, whatever it's on the wall, and that's my culture all of a sudden. And I love how you tied the social responsibility with speaking up to the CEO, because I do believe, or the boss, because I do believe that
Whoever.
the first day you become the boss or the CEO is the last day you hear the actual truth of the culture and the people behind, that are.
So often true. And this is a way to flip that, to encourage younger, well, frankly, anyone who leaves an organization for the reasons we've talked about. It's different if you're leaving for a new opportunity and something exciting, or you're moving, totally different. But if you're leaving because the workplace is toxic, or you've been discriminated against, or you've been harassed, or bullied, I think you owe it to yourself first. Because when we leave those organizations without saying anything, it leaves a hole in us. It leaves a bitterness. It leaves a sense of anger and resentment. But if you go and talk to the leaders, you're going to leave with a completely different framework, which is, I am courageous. I have values, and you did not meet up to those values. And I'm leaving, but the problem is still with you. And you are responsible for solving that problem. And I wish you well in doing that. But it won't involve me. And that's a pretty powerful way to move forward in the world.
Do you think that an individual contributor can make such an impact in a big corporation? Let's say someone hears, I don't know, American Airlines, and they just feel that they're just a number, counting numbers. They're a number on a spreadsheet in their eyes. But truly, like, you work within a core, within a small team. You can make an impact in that team, and that can spread up.
Absolutely. And that's the ripple, right? If you build you can have an organization where there isn't a lot of respect historically. But if you build a team culture where amongst your colleagues in your unit, there is absolute accountability and respect, there is such a thing as the ripple impact. And all of a sudden, you will see that others will want to come and join that team. And maybe it'll take time, but you have the chance to have an impact. And if there's one mantra that for me is every day, and I say this in every time I speak, no, it doesn't matter what location, because I've had the incredible honor of speaking all over the world, always say the same thing, which is people will forget what I said, what you said. They'll probably forget a lot of what you did or what I did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And just imagine if we went to work every day and we logged in, or we showed up in an office or an environment and we thought to ourselves, today, I'm going to continue to think about what I say and remember that what I do and say makes people feel. And I have a choice. I can make people, even when I'm stressed, even when there's a deadline, even when it's hard, I can make people feel supported, appreciated, cared for. I can have patience and tolerance, and I can treat people with dignity and respect, or I choose not to. And think of the difference in how those people will feel. Because people respect leaders and colleagues that are hardworking, that hold each other accountable. They don't respect when they do it by being mean or intolerant or impatient or are not very understanding. So it's not about the leader as a person. It's about, what do you make people feel when you lead, even in the hardest times? And that, to me, if we all started work with that in our brain every day, I think we could fundamentally change most workplaces. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but over time, I believe we could.
I was about to change. I was about to ask the a good mindset for us to have as a team. From it could be from a boss to employee or vice versa, but a good mindset. And I think that being accountable, knowing that you're making someone feel a certain way because you are, and just having that in your mind, it's a game. It changes.
Everything. And you will also, what I think is so important about that is you will feel like, even if you've had to make hard decisions, or you've had to performance manage someone who's not doing well, but you will have done it in a way that upholds your own core values. And you will have done it with respect and dignity and compassion. That doesn't mean that you're soft. It means that you're a good leader, that you have feelings, that you're dialed into the needs of the people you serve. Because you serve. You don't own people, you serve them. And it doesn't matter if you're a leader. Like, I spend a lot of time with people who aren't leaders. They don't believe they're leaders. And what I say is, no, you are a leader every day at work, because you can be a workplace respect leader by showing up with that attitude. If you interact and demonstrate every day the values that you hold dear, workplace respect, compassion, tolerance, patience, kindness, these are all free, but they're priceless. They're priceless to our society. They're priceless to you as a person. They're priceless to the people who want and need you to work well with them. And it's not just about treating people the way you want to be treated. No, it's about treat people the way they want to be treated. And get to know your people, get to know your colleagues, because when you get to know them, you will also begin to understand, what do they need from me? And that's how you build team. And that's how you build from the ground the workplace culture where everyone can show up and say, I can be me today. And when you get that, you get high performance teams, period. And if your goal is to build a high performance team, start there. Build relationships with your people. Earn their trust and their compassion and their confidence, and you will have that high performance team.
Oh, I love that. I love that, Paul. I want to ask you the very last question, which is where do we find you online?
Oh, well, you can join my incredible tribe of workplace respect leaders on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is very easy. If you look for Paul Pelletier on LinkedIn, I have, I don't know, 14 or 15,000 followers, and we talk about it all the time. If also my website is called pushingpastimpossible.com. So if you Google pushingpastimpossible.com, because I believe that we believe some of this is impossible, and I don't buy that. I don't buy that we can't change our workplaces, our teams, the culture of our workplaces. I believe we can, and it isn't impossible. We just have to push past that. So those are the two easiest places to find me. And look, I will end by saying, if you or anyone who's listening, or anyone who's listening has someone in their life who is being bullied or harassed, please get them in touch with me, because I'm there. My absolute goal is to not have anyone make the mistakes I made, to have tools. And I'm not selling this book, but this is the book that I wrote that is something I didn't have, which was, it's a guidebook for how to deal with workplace bullies. And it doesn't matter what your role is, it is designed to help everyone figure out what can they do, even if they're not the targeted person, what can they do to help prevent or stop the bullying from continuing. So if anyone is dealing with that, please get in touch with me and I will help in whatever way I can. It doesn't matter where you are, I will help.
Want to acknowledge what you do. I think it matters. It matters a great deal. We need more leaders such as you to help us every day, like in our lives. And so I'm grateful to have, to have met you, to be having this conversation, and hopefully many more conversations in the future.
Likewise.
And so I just wanted to say thank you. I acknowledge what you do, your work, your life's work matters so much to people like me and us.
And I don't take that lightly ever. And that is what keeps me doing this. And that is what drives me to continue. To anyone who will take 5 minutes to listen, I'm prepared to have an opportunity for them to realize that they can have an immense impact on others, but most importantly on themselves, and become happy people sooner. And that's what everyone really wants more than anything. Is success is happiness. It's not all the things that we somehow believe it is. All the money in the world won't make you happy. You have to find that place.
Amen to that. I agree 100%. You can be living in a mansion and be miserable, or you can be on any place with family, with friends.
Or super poor and without much hope and be happy. Doesn't, it's such a mindset. So
Thank you so much.
thank you. It was wonderful to meet you. Y eso no es la primera conversación. Yo estoy seguro.
Estoy seguro que no. Habrá muchas más.
Absolutely. Stay well.